Invisible sufferers, voiceless, faceless, nameless, bruised and broken children, their silenced screams unheard, longing, lonely, aching, forever trapped in the tragic time warp of abuse. The broken boy was just a little boy when I first met him. His father, a church member, was a good friend of my second husband at the time. I did not trust or like his father at all for various reasons, including listening to my intuition and feeling extremely uncomfortable in his presence. So thankfully I worked hard to stay away from him and did my best to keep my children safe from him over the years. My personal description of the broken boy's father: he was a fire and brimstone abuser, and although he was not a cult leader, he certainly seemed to me to be a very powerful one with a cult following amongst many of the adults in our church, whom I believe he manipulated, coerced, and swayed into following him in many of his fanatically evil disguised as religious ways. He caused so much fire and brimstone abuse pain in not only his own family, but in so many other families that got too close to him, who he influenced, and as a result, many children suffered. My abusive husband at the time loved him. They were the best of buddies, two peas in a pod. Even hearing about this monster's recent death was actually re-traumatizing for me, bringing up so much anger for all the atrocities, fear, hurts, and damage he caused. Over the years, there have been a number of deeply affected children that I mothered, and some I've counseled in their sufferings when they were children, and still from time to time to this day as adults. The monster's name does not deserve a place of mention in my world, and I believe in the world of many others also, not even in his death. The photograph I have used for this presentation, is one of the broken boy standing in the middle with church friends on either side of him. They also at the time experienced being, in the girl's, now a lady's, words, desperately abused. Their parents being closely connected to the broken boy's family, spending a lot of time visiting together. The broken boy's father was a man whose Bible was old-looking, well-worn and well-read, tattered pages filled with a rainbow of colors on every page from all the important scriptures he marked. Such a good Christian man, it would appear to anyone who did not know him well, but to me he was evil personified. The cruelty this man inflicted on the broken boy, his adopted son, a brother and sister adopted too, was horrendous. I won't speak too much about what the other children suffered, and yes, others did. The abuser chose to seclude his family from the real world, keeping them separated and tucked away from anyone or anything that wasn't connected to his fire and brimstone belief system or church activities, which were closely scrutinized and monitored, and I believe even controlled by him and his twisted, dogmatic, biblical interpretations and rules. The broken boy and his two siblings, including the 6 other children born to that marriage, were homeschooled by their parents. Many a story about the cruelty that was inflicted on the broken boy came to our ears via not only him and other children, but also by gardeners and others who had the first-hand displeasure of witnessing the children suffering under the cruel domination of their father. The broken boy said to me about himself and his biological brother and sister, "We were never his kids. We were just baggage." In the broken boy's own words, as he shared with me yesterday, "We were often dragged by our ear or hair, and our faces shoved under the cold tap, which was turned on to full blast. It had a lot of pressure, and we were half drowned." The little girl in the picture remembers these awful, abuse-ridden scenes during her family's frequent visits to their house. Also, witnessing the father's angry, shouting, growling face while he was inflicting these terrible abuses on her friends. On top of this, she was greatly affected by the dreadful abuses that her own parents had inflicted on her and her siblings as well. So, let me just mention briefly here that so much has been written about the abused child, but not enough on what can also happen to a child who witnesses a sibling or friend, or anyone for that matter, being abused. Children who do not receive appropriate services to address witnessing violence are at increased risk of developing psychiatric disorders such as anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder and personality and substance abuse disorders. On more than one occasion, the broken boy would come to our home crying in his brokenness, and my children and I did our best to comfort him through his trauma. On one occasion, as a 16-year-old, he arrived at our door terribly frightened, shaking, crying, and pale. I will never forget the abject fear in his eyes that day. It's a picture burned into my memory that will haunt me forever. When his father arrived home to our home moments later, fuming angry and ranting like the devil at our door, demanding to check through our house for his son, my boys had hidden their friend behind a bedroom door, and we refused to let the monster in, saying that his son was not at our home. Not believing us, he immediately called his son's phone, hoping to hear it ringing in our house. Thankfully, we had thought of that already, and the phone had been switched off. The monster went away, but I can only imagine with horror what might have been awaiting this boy when he finally went back home. Now in his adulthood, at the age of 44 years, the broken boy has blocked out most of his past memories. A coping mechanism and mind protection mechanism employed by the minds of many an abused child. Much of those horrible times when my own children were young and I was doing my best to mother and love all the neglected or abused children that came our way, I was living very much in my own broken child personality still, and living with our own abuser. I was struggling to do the whole adulting thing and was easily triggered as a result of my own inner child fear and pain from my past. Young at heart, being surrounded by children was the one thing that kept me going strong. The broken boy, now an adult, says that he only vaguely remembers coming to us for sanctuary that awful night. To this day he calls me Mom, which I am extremely humbled and honored by. On looking back, the broken boy said to me recently, when I was hiding behind that door at the age of 16, I felt like I was a blubbering 6-year-old. He told me how often, after his father had severely beaten him, shouted all sorts of abuses at him, this broken boy would go outside and punch wooden boxes with his hands until his hands bled. Or he'd cut his arms with a razor blade and deliberately rub lemon juice and salt into his wounds so that the intensity of that pain would block out what he had just gone through. He told me also how often he used to own up to things that his sister had done to prevent her from being beaten. He said that he did that all the time. Yesterday, the broken boy shared with me some of the horrors that he remembers or has been reminded of, or that have come back to his memory since his therapy journey in 2017. We had to sleep in the bath, which had a leaky tap at night, as a punishment. Once my brother had his ankle smashed with a hockey stick because we visited the neighbors and they were black. My sister and I also got it, but my brother got it worse. I was sent to sleep outside many nights for misbehaving, and my sister and brother used to sneak me a blanket until the windows got covered with chicken wire so that they couldn't anymore. Sometimes we had to stand outside naked in the cold of winter as a punishment too, and there were all the beatings and the kicking us when we were down, and smashing our heads into walls and whatever else. There were also the times we had to kneel in the lounge in front of a chair with a glass of water and one slice of bread as punishment for the whole day. We were not allowed to see friends or have sleepovers at friends. School, movies, and music, they were all banned. There was a consistent shouting and screaming. I remember when I was 8 or 9, putting in a wall plug, and the lights tripped, and because I was too scared to take the plug out because of the sparks, I got a bath drowning, and was still forced to pull the plug out afterwards. I remember one night where my brother and I packed some baked beans and wanted to ride to Zimbabwe on our bicycles. We didn't make it far. The broken boy's family had at one stage been reported to child welfare, but somehow, I will never understand how, the monster got away with it, and after a while the welfare went away, leaving them to continue on as before. I believe that the father was very clever at covering up the truths with biblical excuses, manipulations, and lies, and I also believe that the family would have been far too afraid to cross him. The words that come to mind as I write this: coercion, denial, concentration camp, and even Stockholm Syndrome. My children and the broken boy were best of friends and grew up together in the church. My second son and him are still connected today, even though they are living far apart. The broken boy remembers my second son as his best friend, but says that he always looked up to my firstborn son as someone he wanted to grow up to be like because, in his words, he was my adult comparison. The person, I said, when I grow up I want to be like that, dedicated, no temper, etc. And he and I were the same age. As children, the broken boy and some of the other children who were affected by the abuser directly or indirectly would spend a lot of time at our house visiting with my children and I. Some of those children also still call me auntie or mom to this day. I'd like to believe that their time with my children and I was strengthening and in some ways healing for them. I have seen those children and their siblings battling many great odds in order to survive to their adulthood. Some, including my own, have, in spite of their struggles, grown up to be wonderful, loving adults and parents. Another child and his siblings also, who did not spend much time at our house, have grown up with narcissistic traits and are not easy to be around. Some chose the path of drug addiction, and many of the children separated themselves from the church, and some even from believing in God and religion altogether, because of how hurt they were as children and how invisible they felt in the very community that should have protected them from the horrors they were forced to face. In the end, I have come to believe, it was actually not about the church at the time. It was more about the people who had gotten so manipulated, pulled in, and dragged down by the power of one awful, and dare I say again, evil man. But whatever happens, the broken boy, who still struggles greatly as a result of his father's horrendous abuses, has continued to work hard for his healing and is able to function well enough today. He is very happily married to his second wife and has 2 wonderful children with her. After a failed first marriage and a tragic separation from his first 2 children born of that marriage, and he is back at church after a long absence, back as a result of his deep sense of care and responsibility towards a wheelchair-bound man who asked him to take him to church. He told me that the one thing that makes him feel really fulfilled and happy and that gives his life meaning is when he is able to help someone else who is in need. He has also always found great meaning in creativity and is an extremely talented artist and AI artist. His creativity helps to keep him calm and engaged with life, and may even be somewhat of an escape mechanism, I believe. He still struggles greatly to find peace in sleeping, so stays up all hours of the night, and also still struggles with outbursts of extreme intolerance towards others and burning rage, where he will fist the wall or door, for instance, leaving his knuckles bleeding. He told me that doing this has been his only coping mechanism his whole life. I bleed or something breaks. He added, I know I have my dad's rage in me, and it has been my way of coping or dealing, as I didn't know any other way. And knowing that it's his rage makes me even angrier, which adds to the problem. I still lose it quite badly with my son sometimes, but I will never ever think of raising my hand. I stopped that when I saw the fear on the face of my 6-year-old daughter from my first marriage. I was about to give her a hiding, and saw my own frightened child face reflected in hers. I'm now trying to go back to church, to fix this, his way. I haven't been going for 15 years, he went on to say. Some movies make me cry bitterly. Aladdin, when he sets the genie free, for instance, and every single Disney movie makes me cry. I've struggled through a 10-year drug addiction during my 20s. My sister, unfortunately, is still there. I was never consoled or made sure I was okay by my mom, either. So, even now, I battle to do that. If someone gets hurt, I don't know what to do. I think they call it empathy. I don't understand when people fuss and say, "Are you all right?" My mom and I never discussed any of my struggles. I slipped a swear word the other day when I was angry, and my wife said, "Sis, do you kiss your mother with that mouth?" I thought about it. My mom and I have never ever said we love each other or shown any affection, which is weird because I'm the opposite. I shower my family with affection. I can count the hugs I've had from my mom on 3 fingers. I can share anything with you, he said to me, because I feel safe and can express myself. Remember, you're the mom I ran away to. I can tell you anything. On chatting with the broken boy about his inner child, he admits that he does not detect an inner child because he believes that he might still be living in his child's subpersonality that has not yet fully discovered his adult self. We had a recent discussion about his struggles with intolerance and lack of patience towards others, and how closely these behaviors sometimes resemble his abusive father's behaviors. On Sunday, I had a glimpse of just how much power his father still has over him. On Saturday, something had upset him, and in a fit of rage he had fisted the wall with until his knuckles bled. On Sunday morning, he received a call from his wheelchair friend, asking him if he'd take him to church. He had no intention of going to church before that. At church, he had some really meaningful experiences and really enjoyed himself. Soon after dropping his friend off after church, the broken boy and I were voice chatting to each other on WhatsApp. He tried to tell me how special his time at church was, and how a boy he had grown up with, now also a man, came to him with such kind words. As he spoke to me, he got all choked up and started to cry, almost immediately after tapping into these deep emotions of his, which must have taken him back to the many times he'd cried in his childhood. Something snapped, and he went off telling me about how stupid the world is. Stupid, stupid, stupid. The old lady the other day didn't know how to drive. I was rude to her. The queer who wanted to serve me, I refused to be served by him. Stupid, stupid, stupid. As I listened to the broken boy ranting about the whole stupid world, I could hear his father ranting at him, and my heart ached. He was broken down so much as a child, so often told how stupid he was, and probably listened to how stupid, sinful, and bad everyone and everything in his life was, through his father's voice, that in the end his worldview has become so warped that he can no longer trust anything or anyone outside of the trust he had built up. He has built up with a select few. I quietly listened to him, and once he was done, I gently let him know once again just how much power his abusive father still had over him. I told him that the day that he can allow that homosexual man to serve him without judging him, he will then know that he's taken his power back and separated himself from his father's cruel, judgmental, and relentless domination over him. And the question I asked was whether he ever once wanted his dear wife and children to witness through him some of the awful things that his father had done to him, and how it made him feel. He responded during our chat, "My worst fear is causing my kids to feel like I did, so I give them everything I can, everything I didn't have, And when my son doesn't seem to appreciate it, I get mad. Is he still invisible? Can you see him? Can you hear him? Do you care? The broken boy. The monster took the little boy and ripped him all apart, trampled each and every piece and stabbed his tiny heart, then burnt the fragments in a fire until they turned to ash, then beat the ashes to a pulp and threw them in the trash. I thank you for listening. Right, I'm going to follow up with the discussion we had after this. I started taping this discussion a little bit late because there was a problem with the Zoom recording, and so it'll start a little bit late into Taria's talk to us. Thank you so much.
Evil, which is a rest that will to meaning in terms of abuse, of hurt, and of oppression and domination and accusation and condemnation. And it was no more powerfully witnessed than by Frankl himself in the concentration camps, where he was confronted with sheer evil in the form of dehumanizing the person. As one of the survivors described it, their aim was to destroy the human spirit, to make us grovel like animals. And there's a great sense of power that the abuser gets in feeling that he can render somebody so helplessly at his mercy. And just to illustrate this, one of the survivors, that was a child, and but a 14-year-old, but because she didn't look Jewish, got taken to work in the underground and was caught by the Gestapo and brought to the headquarters. And when she was confronted by a man, think about this abuser, a Nazi that took delight in torturing Jews. It was his custom once a day to get a Jew from that was still the Kovno ghetto, and offer him a cigarette and then shoot him in the mouth. And he said to this defiant little girl, why don't you bend down and kiss my boots and beg for your life? Because she refused to do that. He said, don't you know I've got the power over life and death? I'm telling you this story because it's got such correlations to this evil abuser. And she stood as upright as she could, and she said, yes, you do have the power to kill me. And you can decide whether I live or die. And that is a decision you have. But my decision is that I will not bend down, kiss your boots, and beg for my life. Now, that was the most powerful show of what Frankl called the defiant power of the human spirit, of the thrust of the will to meaning in each one. And of course, as we do therapy, this is the spirit that we seek to evoke. So first, with this introduction, look at the abuser. Where do you think he got his sense of power? The Nazi system declared that they were the superior race, okay? And they exercised the ability to rid society of unwanted elements without qualms of conscience. So where did this man find his power? What made him feel that he was like a god? It's very interesting. He used religion. And this is the nature of evil, that it sanctifies evil as good. So this is what he did. In other words, it's a total reversal of the good, a total hijacking of it, and then using it in this kind of show of omnipotent power that actually delights to get a following through oppression. Don't we see it in the world today too? Oppressors that rule by fear. All right, that was just a remark. What about the what influence do you think Pan had? Let's have some other comments. I've said my say. How did Pan salvage, in a sense, this broken boy's still very struggling will to meaning, but look what he could have achieved with such a background that he's still struggling with. So what is it with Pan that made an impact for the better on this broken man?
Taria, I think it's Pan's ability to offer him a safe space, a loved space, a space where he can say everything that's on his mind, not feel judged, not be hurt. I think she has that ability in working with other people. She creates that space of safeness, of hope, of love.
Absolutely, Jean. What was Pan telling the truth, or was she telling a lie?
Are you asking me? Yes, she was telling the truth.
The truth. The truth. Frankel said, what our clients need is a faith in the unconditional meaningfulness of life. But how do they get that if they do not experience unconditional love for the worthiness of their person? Because Frankel said the two are utterly connected. The inherent worthiness of the person. Absolute dignity, and this is it. This elicits the will to meaning. It actually elicits what the person really is, how they've really been put together as somebody of worth needed in the world. And that's what Pan did. She saw him. She heard him. She didn't listen to the horror. She listened to how he suffered the horror. And that makes such a difference. Not so that you feel, wow, somebody's seeing my struggle. In other words, I'm not altogether bad. I'm struggling to be good. And then to hear that you are good, and that you are loved, and that you do need protection, and that I will stand in for you, and that I won't give up on you. And that's exactly what Pan did, and that has brought this man, and not only this man, but the other abused children that Pan took under her wing. This is the touch. of healing. To make the person feel that their life has got some meaning. And it's not a piece of rubbish.
Ryall, there's also for me an element of the invitation into my life. So that does come with, I view you as absolutely worthy. And your invitation into your space, Pan, I think that is so precious. Even given you know where you came from as well, just that safety.
Yes. This is a very powerful element to pick up, Margriet. What gives Pan such a powerful ability to empathize with the abused and the broken? What makes her voice so powerful in that regard?
I'm wondering,
isn't it? Yes.
So, and a question came up for me as well now. I don't want to say it's easy, but one is able to empathize with somebody coming from a space where you were also abused. Your life was also difficult. But then my question is, if you had a wonderful life, is that then not also possible still?
Oh, well, what? Come on, somebody else answer that question. You know, what is it that Frankl said? That you don't, you know, suffering is not something obligatory, you know, like the monks who slept on nails in order to be more spiritual. It's not to say that unless you haven't suffered that way, you can't know what suffering is.
Exactly.
But I do think that in terms of experience and sort of knowing certain things that can trigger or that can happen, which somebody who would not have had the same experience put you at an advantage to be able to interpret those children better. Because somebody who has never been rejected, for example, by a parent, would not maybe, unless they've been trained very deeply, quickly see which triggers or which is pointing to something that might be there. And I think, especially for children, if they've been traumatized like that and they see another adult who actually has time for them and more so actually takes their side, then that becomes that safe space. And I also think that Frankl also spoke about it, but it's quite a biblical and Old Testament concept of that, the gift of tears or the witness of tears. So when children actually see that the grown-up is crying because of them and is crying with them, that seems to bond one together in an unbreakable bond of understanding. And I think that Pan has got the ability to share real and profound tears with suffering people.
Martha, you're so right. Just first of all, you know, here in Israel, we are in a war situation, and people are, especially the family members of the hostages, and can't imagine the abuse. Okay, they are extremely traumatized, and there was a great cry for professionals to counsel family members. And I thought I would do that. And then I thought, I'm not going to. You know why? Because I saw a group counseling that was done by one of the family members who had somehow succeeded in overcoming her own grief, but who could feel the way that the other family members felt. And she was such a powerful counselor. It's almost like, if I should come and be, it's almost like a family say, well, how can you feel for us? You weren't in our position. You were protected. You were protected from all of that. So there's something very, very true about what you say, Martha. It's not to say that we do not feel empathy, but it brings me to a very powerful point that I've noticed over the years with clients that have suffered and then found healing, and with students who have suffered and studying logotherapy. It's in the area of their personal sufferings or problems that because they have felt what Frankel said, what should not have been, what ought not to have been, had provoked such a powerful longing for what should have been that they wanted to become the kind of helpers for other people who suffer similarly to what they've suffered. Almost like a mission in life, a calling in life, is shaped in the crucible of the problems that you had, where you had to struggle through, where you searched for meaning. And especially if you found that meaning, you are so inspired to, and through your own feelings of empathy with the sufferer, that it becomes a mission. And then what is more, that very suffering in that area has given you the skills that somebody else that have not suffered like you have do not have that kind of skills. They don't have those skills. And this is, you have skills in a different way, in other areas that are closer to your personal experience. So this is so remarkable about Pan. Pan, just share with us the things that in your life that has been rays of light that really helped you heal, or rather helped you to struggle through to healing that you eventually found. But in this boy's life, for example, what did you experience that gave you a boost to or inspired you or encouraged you to go on fighting?
I think I'm not very good at answering questions, but I think, say for instance, wanting not to be like my own mother, so trying to be the best mother I could be, and I know since logotherapy, obviously, that's completely changed my life, because I found the family that I'd always been looking for. I can remember arriving at UNISA and sitting there crying all the time because I felt so stupid, and who was I to be at a university? Because that's when we used to do logotherapy at UNISA, and just being totally accepted. Even when I was crying, people just carried on as if nothing, I was just one of the crowd. It didn't matter that I was crying. And you, Teria, you're just unbelievable. Because it seems that it doesn't matter what I do that I consider wrong and makes me feel less than, you're just always there. You always come back again. It doesn't matter what happens. You're consistent. So really, it's my logotherapy family and today, and my purpose in life, writing a book, believing that I'm here for a purpose and a reason. Since I was a child, even my daydream world had an image in it where it said I was meant to be here. So I've held on to that, and I've never felt alone. I've always felt that I was being watched over by a God, that I had friends in heaven, even if I didn't have friends on earth. So I always said to my kids, if I die, I've got lots of friends on the other side, so don't worry about me. You'll know I'll be celebrating. So I've always believed that heaven's, I've got a lot of people that actually can see what's happening from heaven, and they know that I'm a good person. So even if I don't feel good in the world, I feel good in heaven. So, yeah.
Yes, and but when I got to know you, and especially through your assignments, I mean, what is it that actually touched you? I was amazed at you. I was amazed at how you have struggled through all your life. I was amazed at how you cared for your sister, how you even stood in for her and would rather take the abuse than her and sexual raping than that happening to your sister. I saw your love for animals. I saw your taking such joy in your Greek mother's creativity and cooking, because she was such a woman and gentle person. But how you created. This was long before you came into logotherapy. You had written thousands of poems. You became an artist. You sketched and painted. You cooked. You in the most marvelous dishes that you prepared. You had a garden and loved growing things, and you were always generously giving. Now, where did that come from? That was before there was any real affirmation in terms of what you're speaking about when you came into logotherapy. And that is what amazed me. And I think it was the amazement that I could express towards you that made the wounded child come out of hiding and began to express herself as you're doing now in writing your book. You are giving voice to all that has happened to you as a broken child. And you speak on behalf of the broken. And it's a powerful, powerful testimony and stand against the abuser. Because this is the greatest evil, is what you do to a helpless child. And your love of animals, why? Wow, this is, I think you sometimes love your dogs more than anything else. It's all of those things that are such powerful signs of the will to meaning, and of our unscathed human spirit, and of our struggling towards meaning. So way before we actually find it, because this is part of the search. This is part of and more than the search. It's as you described it. It's the intuitive realization that you're not alone. You're not alone. Well, look at that experience of Franco when he was released from the camps, and he sank down on his knees, just overwhelmed by the blue sky and the open spaces and the flowers and the birds, and realizing that life is beautiful, and it went on, and it was always there, even in the camps when they could delight in sunrises or sunsets. My word, the uncanny awareness of what Frankel called the unconscious God, that we are, whether we consciously realize it or not, we are linked and related to the divine. A presence that never leaves us. And this is the great and liberating factor when we can say, life is beautiful. I love it. I'm grateful for it. I want to live it. Wow, isn't that quite something? So what powerful, powerful logotherapy lessons are we not learning from just listening to the stories of our clients and of those that do come across our lives for us to be that kind of a reflection of that presence that they seek and then that they realize was always there. Sure. All right. Is it not almost 40 minutes? Is it? Please. Any other remarks? Yes.
I upgraded my account so we can continue.
Good. So now, I'm talking too much. What? Please.
Can I say something to Pan?
Okay.
Hi, Pan. I'm sorry I was a little bit late, but as always, so wonderful to hear you talking. When you said that you found your family in logotherapy, in the logotherapy community, I think that most of us have a sense of that we were brought to logotherapy somehow for some reason in some way that we can't quite always necessarily explain, on a very logical or rational level. And what I'd like to put to you is I think that why you found your family in the logotherapeutic community was that you came home because you were living so very logotherapeutically long before you'd possibly even heard of logotherapy. And I'd like to point this out on several levels. Firstly, one thing which Dr. Chantal has already mentioned this evening, the defiant power of the human spirit. And the second is responsibility and responsibleness with a capital R. We are all familiar with the story of, the abused becomes the abuser, that somebody who's been abused abdicates their own responsibility in terms of their own children. You did not do that. You stood up and you said it yourself right now. I became determined not to be the kind of parent that I was. You recognized while what was happening to you, exactly what logotherapy teaches us. This is what ought not to be. And you took on the responsibility yourself for changing. You didn't sit back and say, oh, poor me, where do I look? Where do I look to change this? You looked within yourself. And simultaneously, with your suffering, what you were doing, as Dr. Chantal so beautifully pointed out, you were practicing things like the creative and experiential values. You were cooking, you were gardening, you were painting, you were writing poetry. And at the same time as fulfilling those creative values, that in turn was giving you pleasure in return, which is then experiential. And so you were already living the life of a logotherapist long before you came to logotherapy, and that's why you feel so comfortable in this community, and B, why you are such a wonderful logotherapist and such a help to other people in their suffering.
Yeah, so wonderful. Right.
Syria, I would like to ask you and everybody else, but I mean, when you have suffered so much in life and you deal with clients or congregants who are also suffering, what must you do, or what do you do so that you are not completely triggered and completely finished after a session? Or are you completely finished, and how do you protect yourself? Because I do think that sometimes one is exposed to see or hear things that can really, you have to grab hold of your heart sort of and say, oh, my heart just, keep standing. I would just like to have your comments on that and your advice.
Jean, and I think Ben can answer that question, because you told me just how you felt after you again had to listen to the story.
Yeah, I think that we have to bear the pain with our clients sometimes, because like yesterday when he was talking to me, I was so broken that it actually caused a chemical imbalance, that I had a migraine the whole day. My body was actually vibrating inside. I felt sick. I was quite disabled yesterday because of just hearing his story and and remembering the little boy that I loved so much. I told him, I'm crying, because I was crying when he was talking to me. Um, after that, I was completely wiped out. Nothing. Sometimes we just have to bear it. So I made sure I slept last night and had a better day today. Yeah.
It's a very powerful point. It is a very powerful point that you brought out, Jean. Just, you know, Mark spoke about homecoming, and it's such a powerful demonstration that logotherapy actually is the science of human existence, because what happens in logotherapy is what happens in life. And so now coming to the protection of the therapist, I find that what helps me after I can be very broken too, like Pan, hearing because the emotions of rage and the emotions of feeling such grief that you yourself feel broken, that you want to cry out to the heavenlies yourself, is to experience the opposite in terms of goodness, to find solace in what gives you solace, to go and hug your husband, or play with your children, or remember, or almost just get your balance again by experiencing the good. Whatever is good and lovely and of good report, think about those things. It is very, very, in a sense, destructive. No, but that isn't the right word. It really is very agonizing to be confronted with such evil. One really can't stand it almost, and one needs a compensation of experiencing good things as well. I find that the end result of this is that I have an even greater appreciation of what is good, and even greater joy in seeing something wonderful. It's almost as if you become more sharply focused in on what should be, and that it's almost becomes part of the calling to overcome that evil by soaking yourself and delighting yourself and becoming triumphant in a feeling of good in the world. Look at the diary of Anne Frank, how she managed to survive what she did while she was in hiding, by refusing to believe that people are all bad. So, to experience good things, to spend time with people you love, brings you back into the real stream of life. That is, Well, I think we can just end with this last thought how powerfully Frankel captured it all by saying what man is, what we essentially are, what has been given to us as a potential, what has been invested in us, like a band speaks about heavenly friends and remembering where she had come from. What we are, what man is, he is not yet. What does that mean? But ought to be and should become. It's this to me is the most powerful unfolding of the will to meaning, that we intuitively sense what we want and what should be and who we are. And then it's a growth process of becoming more and more aware of what ought to be. And in that awareness of what ought to be and the longing for the establishment of what ought to be, that we become an instrument of healing, that we step into our shoes in terms of our particular calling in life, our particular service, our particular way of overcoming evil. All right, everyone. Robert, thank you for joining us tonight. Robert is one of our new students.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you on board.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me be part of it.
Oh, great. We're looking forward to the Pan. We don't want the period, the interim, to be too long to the dream interpretation. So, can we meet in 2 weeks' time on a Thursday? Pan will send out the links and the invitations, that we don't forget the story, and that we can then see how dream interpretation works. Okay? All right. Thank you, everybody. And